All right, so you've sent in a ton of really interesting stuff all about buying small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're diving into today
Yeah.
for you guys.
It's exciting stuff.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
So we want to kind of, I guess today our mission is to take all this information that you've sent
Okay.
and try to condense it down into the most important insights.
Yeah.
To help you figure out,
Yeah.
is this something that you should even consider?
Is it viable?
Yeah, is it viable?
Yeah.
And then if it is something that you're thinking about,
Okay.
how would you actually go about doing it?
Right. Yeah, this whole idea of think big, buy small, own your own company.
Yeah.
It's a pretty compelling idea.
Yeah.
And, it is this sort of third way,
Right.
a third path.
Yeah. Startup.
We're starting something totally from scratch,
Right.
which can be very risky.
Yeah.
There is this other way to go.
Right. And the potential upside is huge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're talking about not only financial rewards of owning a company, but also like that real sense of accomplishment.
Right.
Where you really feel like you're building something, you're shaping the culture.
Yeah.
You're really I guess reaping the benefits of all of your own efforts directly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And having control over
Right.
your own destiny in a way that maybe you wouldn't have in a corporate setting or
Right.
even in a startup where there's so much risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And to guide us on this journey,
Okay.
our main source today is going to be the HBR Guide to Buying a Small Business.
Excellent source.
It is an excellent source.
Yeah.
Written by Richard S. Ruback
Yes.
and Royce Yudkoff.
Mm-hmm.
They are both professors at Harvard Business School.
Yes. They've been teaching this.
They have.
They've been teaching entrepreneurial acquisition for quite a while.
For a long time.
Yeah.
And so these guys really know what they're talking about.
They do.
So,
Okay. So what are we going to unpack today?
Okay.
well, drawing from the kind of help that they list in their book.
All right.
One is this even the right move for you?
Okay. Is this the right path?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you know?
Right.
How do you find
Yeah.
businesses that are actually good businesses?
Right. How do you evaluate them?
And how do you evaluate them?
Yeah.
What might be surprising is sometimes the most promising opportunities
Right.
are in businesses that seem kind of dull on the surface.
Dull businesses.
Dull businesses.
Yes.
And then finally, like, what are those first steps in the acquisition process?
Okay. So like the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
So are you ready to get into this?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's start with that first big question.
Okay.
Is this the right move for you?
Okay.
And Ruback and Yudkoff, they explore the values and goals
Mm-hmm.
that drive a lot of these entrepreneurs
Yeah.
who buy these companies.
Right.
And so they say, if you're someone who really values being your own boss,
Okay.
if you really like the idea of shaping a company culture
Mm-hmm.
and seeing the direct results
Yeah.
of your efforts,
Mm-hmm.
then this might be something that really resonates with you.
That makes sense because I think a lot of people who have had experience in larger companies
Right.
start to experience frustration with things like office politics,
Yeah.
layers of bureaucracy,
Yeah. Less control.
less control as they get more senior.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So that can make this path pretty appealing.
Yeah. Yeah. If that's not something that you enjoy,
Yeah.
then maybe this is a good alternative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just about what you're running away from, right?
Right.
Like, it's also important to have the right skill set and personality traits
Yeah.
to
Absolutely.
really thrive in this area.
Absolutely. They talk about having a solid grasp of basic finance,
Okay.
being able to lead and manage a team effectively.
Yeah.
And importantly, being comfortable making decisions
Mm-hmm.
when you don't have all the information.
With limited information.
Yes, making decisions with limited information.
That makes sense, especially when you're running a smaller business, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have
You got to be comfortable with it.
you don't have maybe the same kind of
Yeah.
resources to do
Yeah.
a ton of market research or something like that.
You got to use your gut.
You have to use your gut.
Yeah.
So common sense is important.
Yes, common sense is very important.
And then the other thing is energy.
Yes. Lots of energy.
Focus.
Focus.
A positive outlook.
Right, because there are going to be setbacks.
Yeah.
There are going to be hurdles.
You got to be able to bounce back.
Yes, resilience.
Resilience and persistence.
Persistence.
Yeah, you got to be able to.
You can't give up.
You can't give up.
Yeah.
All right. So.
Now, on the other side of that,
Yeah.
what are some things that you might have to be okay doing without.
Hmm.
One is a regular salary,
Right.
especially in that initial search phase.
Essentially during that search phase
Yeah.
where you might not be working a 9 to 5.
Exactly. You're going to be putting in a lot of time
Yeah.
and effort into the search.
Right.
And you might not have that steady paycheck coming in.
Yeah. So you got to be okay with a little bit more financial uncertainty.
A little bit more, yeah. And,
Yeah.
you might have to adjust your expectations around recognition, too.
Okay.
You know.
What do you mean by that?
So the prestige,
Oh, okay.
that can come with being part of a
Right.
big, well-known corporation.
Yeah.
It might not be there in the same way.
Right.
Owning your own company definitely brings its own form of recognition.
Right.
But
It's different.
it's a different kind of profile.
It's a different kind of profile. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
You're not going to have, the same kind of brand recognition as working for,
Yeah.
a Fortune 500 company.
Right, exactly. And one of the entrepreneurs featured in the book, Greg Mazur, who acquired Great Eastern Premium Pet Foods,
Okay.
he found immense pride in being the CEO and owner.
Okay.
But as the authors note, it is a shift in professional identity.
Right.
You're not,
Right.
you're no longer a vice president at a big company.
Right.
You are the CEO of your own company.
Yeah.
And they also talk about how your workplace social dynamics might change.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. The relationship between an owner slash CEO
Mm-hmm.
and other management in a smaller firm can be quite different.
Okay.
And, your close friendships at work might evolve beyond your immediate colleagues.
That's interesting. So it's really positioning this as a third path,
Yeah.
a viable alternative to the corporate world and the startup world.
Exactly. It's a third path.
Yeah.
It's a different way to go.
It's a different way to go.
And, it's striking when you think about the statistic they share.
Okay.
Less than 2% of working Americans actually own their own businesses.
Wow.
But the entrepreneurs they've studied in this space generally seem pretty happy.
Okay.
And this can be in contrast with,
Right.
even highly successful executives in big companies
Right.
where they may not have that same level of satisfaction.
So it really comes down to the fact that, the journey itself has to be something you enjoy.
Yes. The
Yeah.
journey has to be rewarding.
Yeah. And if it is, then
Yes.
the financial reward is just like icing on the cake.
Icing on the cake. That's
Yeah.
a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what this opportunity looks like.
Okay.
This isn't just a career move. It's an investment.
It's an investment opportunity.
It's an investment opportunity. And the idea here is you take a business, you grow it, you improve it, and then eventually you sell it
Right.
for way more than you bought it for.
For a significant profit.
Yeah,
That's the goal.
that's the goal.
Yeah.
So, buy low, sell high, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about this book is
Yeah.
they point out how many different types of small businesses are out there.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Everything from, home health care to travel agencies
Yeah.
to
Retail and musical instruments.
musical instruments. It's
A really wide range.
It's a huge range.
Yeah.
They give an example of a guy named Tony Bautista.
Oh, yeah. Tony Bautista.
He was in venture capital,
He was.
but he left to buy a tutoring firm.
Interesting.
And the reason why is interesting.
Yeah.
He wanted to be more hands-on in the actual running of a business.
You wanted to build something tangible?
He wanted to build something tangible.
Yeah.
He also felt like venture capital was a little bit too risky
Yeah. It is a risk.
compared to buying an existing business.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so.
And what they highlighted about him as a key strength
Okay.
was his ability to connect with people
Oh, cool.
from all different backgrounds.
Okay.
And he attributed that to his own varied background.
Okay.
So it really shows that you don't have to have a traditional
Oh, yeah.
business background to succeed.
You don't need an MBA. You don't need an MBA.
Yeah.
You don't need to have gone to Harvard Business School. You
Exactly.
can come from any background
That's good.
as long as you have the right skills
Yeah. And the right mindset.
and the right mindset.
Good.
Yeah. And, and talk about the potential for remarkable rewards in this market.
Okay.
And that's because these businesses are often available at prices that are pretty attractive
Okay.
relative to their profits.
Okay.
So you can actually find some good deals.
You can find a good deal.
Yeah.
So why are these businesses even coming onto the market in the first place?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of it is owner retirement.
Okay.
A lot of these folks, they've built these businesses over many years.
Yeah.
They're ready to retire.
Makes sense.
They're ready to move on.
Yeah.
They're ready to enjoy the fruits of their labor.
Sure.
Other reasons can be things like health issues,
Okay.
personal health issues,
Yeah.
divorce,
Right.
disagreements among partners, or even sometimes they just don't have a family successor
Right.
who's interested in taking over.
Right. Especially if it's a very specialized business.
Especially if it's a specialized business or a manufacturing business.
Right.
Where, the kids just aren't interested.
The kids want to go do something else.
Right? They want to go work for Google.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting because, larger corporations have a lot of different exit strategies.
Right.
But for a smaller business, selling it to someone who's going to run it is often the only option.
Often the only option, and that can keep the prices down.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, beyond the financial rewards, the book talks a lot about the professional independence that you get.
Yeah, you're the CEO.
You're the CEO, you're the boss.
You make all the decisions.
You set the strategy.
Yeah, you set the strategy.
You decide what the company is going to do.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It is a lot of responsibility. But you also have a lot of autonomy.
You do have a lot of autonomy.
Which is something that's really hard to get early on in your career.
Absolutely, especially in a large company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They give an example of a guy named Greg Ambrosia.
Oh.
He's a West Point grad.
Okay.
Former Army officer.
Okay.
And he found that after his experience in the military, corporate life was just really unsatisfying.
It wasn't what he was looking for?
It wasn't what he was looking for. He wanted that, more.
Yeah, he was used to leading.
This leadership and responsibility.
Yeah, he was used to leading a company in combat.
Yeah.
And then he went to the corporate world and he was like, this isn't
doing it for me.
Yeah, this isn't cutting it.
This isn't cutting it, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, his leadership skills were very valuable in his transition to owning and running a business.
Yeah.
He ended up buying a commercial window washing company.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they give another example of a woman named Robin Kovitz, who had a career in private equity, but she decided to buy a small business because she wanted more flexibility with her family.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
so different motivations.
Different motivations.
For pursuing this path.
Yeah, for pursuing this path.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Now, of course, there are risks associated with owning any business.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And they acknowledge these risks.
Yeah.
There's the possibility of revenue declining.
Okay.
Losing key customers.
Yeah.
Facing disruption from technology.
Of course.
But they emphasize that you can mitigate a lot of these risks during the purchase process.
Okay, so you have to really...
Yeah, you have to do your homework.
You have to do your due diligence.
Yeah, you have to do your due diligence.
Yeah.
And they really emphasize finding a business that is enduringly profitable.
Okay. Enduringly profitable.
Enduringly profitable.
What does that mean?
It means it's got a good track record of generating stable income over time.
Huh.
They give some good indicators to look for.
Okay, what are they?
Well, one is you want to look for a company that has a strong base of recurring customers.
Okay, recurring customers.
So these are customers that come back again and again.
Right.
They're not just one-time customers.
Right.
They're customers that are going to keep coming back.
Like a subscription.
Yeah, like a subscription or, something that they need on a regular basis.
Okay.
And while high-growth businesses might sound appealing, they caution that rapid growth often comes with more risk.
Okay.
Because you have to acquire so many new customers.
Yeah.
You might outgrow your existing customer base.
Right.
You might face more competition.
Yeah.
And your profit margins might actually go down.
Interesting.
So slower growth businesses can often be lower risk.
Okay. So low growth can be good.
Yeah, low growth can actually be good in this case. And they're also often valued at lower prices.
Okay.
So you can get a better deal.
Yeah. And they use the example of Greg Ambrosia's window washing company again.
Yeah, the window washing company and Tony Bautista's fire hose testing company.
Yeah. Those aren't very sexy businesses, but...
They're not sexy, but they're profitable.
They're profitable and they're reliable.
They're reliable.
People always need their windows washed.
Exactly.
And they always need their fire hoses tested.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they make a point here.
Okay.
Just because a business is dull in terms of the industry.
Right.
Doesn't mean that being the CEO is dull.
Right.
You're still going to be doing a lot of engaging things.
Yeah.
You're going to be hiring people.
Yeah.
Managing people.
Right.
Streamlining operations. Cultivating customer relationships.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but it's rewarding work.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the acquisition process itself.
All right, the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
So they start by talking about sourcing businesses.
Okay.
Finding businesses that are for sale.
And how do you do that?
Well, there's two main ways.
Okay.
One is working with business brokers.
Okay.
And the other is direct outreach to business owners.
Okay, so let's talk about business brokers first.
Okay.
What are they?
Business brokers are basically intermediaries.
Okay.
They help business owners sell their companies.
Okay.
They manage the whole process.
Okay.
From initial negotiations to the final documentation.
So if you're a buyer,
yeah,
it's good to build relationships with these brokers.
Absolutely.
Because they're the ones who know what's available.
They're the ones who have access to the deals.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other way is direct outreach.
Right. So this is where you proactively reach out to business owners.
Okay.
Even if they're not officially selling.
How do you find these businesses?
Well, you can do some research.
Okay.
You can look for companies and industries that you're interested in. You can look in specific geographic areas.
Okay.
And you could just reach out to the owners and see if they're interested.
Cold call them.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And the advantage of that is that you might be able to find a better deal.
Okay.
Because you're not competing with other buyers.
Interesting.
You're going directly to the source.
Right to the source.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yeah. So regardless of which sourcing method you use, the initial stages involve what they call preliminary due diligence.
Okay, preliminary due diligence.
This is where you start gathering information.
Okay.
Filtering out businesses that don't meet your criteria.
Okay.
And asking more questions.
Okay.
So it's an iterative process.
Back and forth?
Yeah. You learn a little bit, you filter, you ask more questions.
Okay.
And eventually you get to a point where you decide, do I want to make a formal offer?
Okay. And how much should you be thinking about paying for a business?
Well, they give a general benchmark. They say most small businesses sell for somewhere between 3 to 5 times their EBITDA.
Their EBITDA. Okay, what is EBITDA?
EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Okay.
It's a way to measure a company's operating cash flow.
Okay.
Before you get into some of the more nuanced accounting adjustments.
So it's kind of a rough measure of profitability.
It's a rough measure of profitability, yeah.
Okay, so once you've done your preliminary due diligence, and you think you want to make an offer, what's the first step?
The first step is typically to submit an indication of interest or an IOI.
Okay, an IOI.
Yeah.
And what is that?
It's a non-binding letter
that
outlines the price range you're considering.
So you're not making a formal offer yet?
Not yet. You're just saying, hey, I'm interested.
Right.
And I'm thinking about paying this much.
Okay.
And then if the seller is receptive to that, the next stage is the letter of intent, or LOI.
All right, it's the LOI.
This is a more formal document. That lays out the key terms of your offer.
So what kind of stuff is in the LOI?
So it includes the price, any seller financing you might need, any conditions of the deal, a timeline for the next phase of due diligence, and often a period of exclusivity.
Okay, exclusivity meaning like they're not going to shop the deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're not going to talk to other buyers. For a certain amount of time.
Okay, and so what happens after the LOI is signed?
Well, then comes confirmatory due diligence.
Okay, confirmatory due diligence.
So this is where you really dig in
Okay.
and validate all the information you've received.
So this is where you hire the lawyers and the accountants.
Yeah, you bring in the professionals
to
help you really scrutinize the financials. Look at the operations. Talk to employees, suppliers, customers.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
But it's important.
It is important, yeah.
So, and then if everything checks out, you negotiate the final purchase agreement?
Right. This is the legally binding document that lays out all the details of the acquisition.
And then you close. That's the exciting part.
That's the exciting part. You become the owner.
You're the CEO.
You're the CEO.
Congratulations.
But they do emphasize that this whole process takes a lot of commitment.
It does.
And you should be prepared for some setbacks.
Yeah. You're going to face some disappointments.
Yeah.
You're going to find some businesses that you think are great.
Yeah.
And then they turn out to not be so great.
You're going to get outbid.
You might get outbid.
Deals are going to fall apart.
So you got to be resilient.
Yeah. All right. So how much does it actually cost to search for a business?
So they say it could be around $500,000.
$500,000?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, but it's important to break down what that includes.
Okay.
So some of it is out-of-pocket costs.
Okay, like what? Like accountants, lawyers?
Okay.
People who are going to help you with the due diligence. But a lot of it is actually the income you're giving up.
Oh, right. Opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost, exactly.
While you're searching.
Yeah, because you're not going to be working your regular job.
Right.
You're going to be focusing on this full time.
Okay.
So you're giving up your salary.
Right. Your benefits.
Your benefits.
Everything.
Everything.
Okay, so what are some of the key decisions that are going to affect that cost?
Okay, well, one of the first decisions you got to make is, do you want to search alone or with a partner?
Okay, so what are the pros and cons there?
Well, a partner can be great.
Okay.
Because you can share the workload.
Yeah.
You can have someone to bounce ideas off of.
Right.
You can bring different skills to the table.
Right.
But it also means doubling your expenses.
Right, because now there's 2 salaries to cover.
2 salaries, 2 sets of living expenses, and so on.
And what if you disagree with your partner?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You have to have a really clear understanding up front about how you're going to make decisions.
If you're going to have like a, one person gets the deciding vote or...
Yeah, exactly. How are you going to resolve disagreements?
Yeah. How are you going to resolve disagreements?
Yeah, that's important. Okay, so another big decision.
Another big decision is geographic focus.
Okay, so are you going to limit your search to a certain area?
Yeah. Are you going to look nationally?
Okay.
Are you going to focus on a specific region?
And what are the trade-offs there?
Well, a national search is going to give you more options, but it's also going to require more travel.
Yeah.
You're going to have to build relationships with brokers all over the country.
Makes sense.
A regional search is going to be more focused.
Yeah.
But you might have fewer options.
Fewer options.
Yeah, okay.
And then the other big decision is sourcing strategy.
Right. Are you going to primarily use brokers?
Okay.
Or are you going to do more direct outreach? Right. And we talked about the pros and cons of those earlier.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so what are some of the other costs that we need to be thinking about?
Okay, well, you're going to have legal and administrative costs for setting up your search entity.
Okay, my search entity. What is that?
That's typically an LLC or an LLP.
Okay.
It's the legal structure
that
you're going to use to conduct your search.
Okay, and why do I need that?
Well, it provides some legal protection.
Okay.
And it helps you organize your finances.
Okay.
And you're going to have to pay legal fees to set that up.
To set up the LLC.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you're raising money from outside investors, you're also going to need a shareholders agreement.
Okay.
And that can be another $25,000 in legal fees.
Wow. Okay, so then there's office expenses.
Office expenses, yeah.
If I'm doing this alone,
can
I just work from home?
You could work from home.
Yeah.
You could get a very basic co-working space.
Okay. And that would be pretty inexpensive.
Yeah, maybe $6,000 a day.